Hey, what's up, YouTube? Kyle back from Hospitality MD, presenting another episode of the podcast today. Before I let you know what we're going to be doing, just take a second, subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on the bell notifications, and press the thumbs up. We want to make sure that as many hospitality people see our content as possible. So thank you so much for tuning in. Now, today's episode is super special because we are featuring, for the first time on Hospitality MD, a salesperson. We have ops backgrounds, we have front office housekeeping backgrounds, and I know I've been guilty of it, and I know if you're in ops, you probably have been too, but sales is kind of mysterious, right? And we've kind of maybe judged them a little bit for what they're doing. They get to go out and do all the cool stuff while we get to stay back at the hotel. Well, we're going to be debunking some of the sales myths, learning what really goes on in the sales office, and finding out what happens when you are in the top 1% of revenue generating salespeople in the Hilton ecosystem. So our guest, Justin Essner, he most recently was a regional sales manager for Hilton Orlando Lake Buena Vista and Hilton Buena Vista Palace. There he sold over 1,800 rooms and 200,000 plus square feet of meeting and event space. He's now an account executive at Widewell, which is revolutionizing the way we solicit feedback and the way that we manage our online reputation. More for that next week. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's interview. Learn a little bit about sales. Justin Essner, thank you so much for joining Hospitality MD today. How are you, my friend?
I'm excellent, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. I'm awesome. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. We are excited because you are the first sales professional that will be interviewing for Hospitality MD. Typically, we, as Greg and I's backgrounds are rooms, operations. We interview a lot of housekeeping and front office people, but it's time to lift the veil on the mystique of sales that I've been guilty of, that I know that all of our audience in operations has probably been guilty of, especially if they work in a full service or large box hotel. Because when your boots are on the marble and there's, you've got your sales team up in the offices, sometimes you really don't know what's going on. So we're looking forward to really kind of debunking some of the sales stuff and really setting the record straight. So recently, you've been a senior regional sales manager with Hilton Buena Vista Palace and the Hilton Orlando Lake Buena Vista. Why don't you tell us how many rooms you were selling?
Sure. So between the complex, there were 1,836 rooms and just under 200,000 square feet of meeting space combined. So that doesn't count outdoor space and stuff like that.
Let's count outdoor space. Do you have that number?
So creatively, we had used parking lots for different events, different things like that. So if we count all of the parking lot space that we had used from different expositions, gosh, the one parking lot alone is like 6 acres. So I don't even know.
So just a uncalculable amount of meeting space if you're really going all in on it and really just pushing.
Yeah. So our kind of MO pre-COVID was, if planners had the ability to think outside the box, we had one of the most unique options in the country, because there are city locations that have like walkable dining options, and you get that kind of city vibe. And then there are kind of resort big box hotels. and the resorts are kind of on an island. Everything happens at the resort, all the evening functions, everything like that. It's just kind of a self-contained event. Well, we were the best of both worlds because you could walk across the street to Disney Springs. And my favorite stat about Disney Springs was they had over 10,000 restaurant seats. So
Wow.
you could just do anything you wanted, like a city center hotel, but we had all the amenities of a resort property. So it was kind of the best of both worlds, something that we had really honed in on prior to the world shifting was doing campus style events. It was really big in the tech industry where they would have both hotels and, you know, different regions would be at different properties. And then their general session would be simulcast between the two hotels. And it was a lot of fun. Again, the tech industry was a big believer. We were starting to get into some pharma stuff in that, but they really kind of bought into the whole campus idea, especially since a lot of the people in the tech industry were younger millennials to middle-aged professionals. They still had that kind of, it had a college feel to it. So we kind of really like dove all in on that thought process, and it was a lot of fun. So different than some other big box and resort style offerings in the country.
Right, because when you think of 200,000 square feet of meeting space, when you think of 1,800 rooms, you think of a convention center hotel. You really don't, and you think about dry, boring. I mean, at least I do. I think about the color beige is what comes to my mind. I think a dry, boring convention center, just kind of uninspiring. But it sounds like you guys are really able to, like you said, set yourselves up as one of the premier destinations in the country, and you were responsible for generating that business. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that kind of experience. But first, let's go back. Let's get a little context for your sales background, and because you don't
Sure.
just start out by selling 1,800 rooms. So how'd you get there?
So I've got a little bit of a diverse background in sales. A mentor, right when I got out of college, he said that for somebody to be good in sales, they need to be able to sell something that people don't want to buy. So I would recommend selling cars or working in the fitness industry and selling gym memberships. So I enjoyed working out. So my first kind of career after college was I worked in the fitness industry selling gym memberships, and it was a grind, and there was a lot of no's, and you learned really quickly how to kind of develop a thick skin. But I'd always kind of had a hospitality background. So through college, I worked in the restaurant industry. I'm a outbacker. So
Nice.
I got my chops in the restaurant space in high school and college, working for Outback back whenever it was like the place to be. That kind of tells how old I am. So then I got into that sales after college, and then I did some real estate for a while. And I think everyone knows what happened in 2007 to 2009 in the real estate business. It just kind of went. So I did a little soul searching, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And there was this unbelievably awesome resort opening in Orlando where I called home, the Waldorf Astoria and the Hilton Bonnet Creek. And they had this.
For those, I just want to stop you right there. How many rooms is that complex as well? Because we're talking another big box Hilton in the Hilton ecosystem, I should say. So what's the room count?
Sure, that hotel has 1,501 rooms. So 498 at the Waldorf, and I think 1,003 at the Hilton. So just over 1,500 rooms. I think it has more meeting space. They were in the process of building an additional ballroom before everything with COVID hit. So, but it's been in the process since 2012 when I was still there. So who knows when that's going to happen?
Sure.
But so my role there, I went to this massive job fair because I had never worked in the hotel industry, and they were hiring for everything. And I interviewed for a bartender position and working at the golf course because I love golf. And I got to like the final stage, and they're like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a bartender, or do you want to work at the golf course? And I said, what's going to get more eyes on me so I can get into the sales department? I said, because that's what I want to do. And I was like, right. I get that I probably don't have the experience necessary to do that. I was like, but I want to kind of shine and showcase my skills. And they said, well, all the executives play golf and all the ownership groups play golf. So if you want the eyes to be on you, I recommend working at a golf course. So I started off as the outside staff supervisor in ops. So I got to see how the quote unquote operation side of the sales stuff goes. Got told to do lots of stuff. And then within about 10 months, I became the golf sales manager, which was kind of my.
That's awesome. That's an in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of the first kind of step in. And it was eye-opening into the fact that all the big pieces of business typically had golf included in it. And so I kind of became an integral part of the site process and got to do some entertaining and different stuff. I had my own golf events that I ran outside of what was going on in the hotel that I sold on my own. But I would say about 80% of what we sold was just to groups in-house, and worked hand in hand with the sales team, had great relationships with them. Some of my best friends in the sales ecosystems within the hotel world come from those days where I was kind of their customer, because I had to make sure that I did a good job, or they were kind of my customer. I had to make sure that I did a good job taking care of their groups in-house so that they would continue to go out and find companies and associations that wanted to play golf. Because if they filled up the hotel with people who didn't want to play golf, we didn't make money. So it was kind of an interesting symbiotic relationship that we had. And it was a lot of fun because I was kind of late 20s. So kind of coming into my own as a professional. And as a salesperson, you have to have a certain level of confidence in kind of your abilities, or else you're never going to make it. And in my early 20s, I don't want to say I was overconfident, but I did not lack any confidence. And in this role, I kind of learned how to be more patient and kind of let the sales process evolve. So I learned a lot about the industry and different stuff. And then from there, I did that for almost 4.5 years. And if they would have paid better, I would have never left that job because it was the greatest job ever. Got to do some wildly fun stuff, became mildly good acquaintances with Roger Clemens, who then introduced me to Toby Keith. So got to play golf with some pretty fun individuals and just do a lot of fun stuff. But got married and decided it was time to take my career to the next level. And I didn't want to leave Orlando. So I was like, I got to sell rooms. So I went from there and I sold two of some of the mid-sized properties for Hilton, the Embassy Suites on International Drive by the Convention Center, in the Doubletree Suites in Disney Springs. So I did that for 3.5 years, worked with the citywide market, got a kind of a really good understanding on how citywides affect compression, and just really understood the overall aspects of what is important for the sales department in a hotel. I also did our transient leisure guest. So like think OTAs and different wholesalers, which was a really great learning experience. I got to partner with Disney on some stuff and just got a really good kind of diverse background of what makes a hotel successful and how to maximize each and every room as much as possible. But the other thing that I never wanted to lose sight on, and I feel like I did a pretty good job with, I knew that I had to tie it into our success was only going to be as good as our operation success. And my general manager at the time is a close friend. Every day, he's like, everyone's a housekeeper and everyone's a salesperson. And he's like, if we can all kind of get behind that, we're all going to be pulling in the same direction. So
what did he mean by that specifically?
So what he means by that is, like, as a salesperson, if I'm walking through the hotel and I see trash, it's my responsibility to pick it up. It's my responsibility to clean it up, to take action. We had a philosophy: pick it up, don't pass it up, because the hotel was 250 rooms, like 7,000 square feet of meeting space. So good mid-sized hotel. But a lot of the people who worked there were kind of taking the step from working in the big boxes in Orlando, and then taking a different level title So if they were assistant front office manager, they were becoming the director of front office, or someone like myself who didn't have sales background within the hotel space, I became a senior sales manager just because I understood how the process worked.
So that was the stepping stone for a lot of that Hilton talent within the Orlando area.
Yeah, so Orlando's kind of a unique market. We have 7 different managed properties, 5 big boxes, or 8 different managed properties, 5 big boxes, and then 3 kind of mid-size. The Embassy Suites Airport is the only one that I haven't really kind of had any affiliation with. I did some stuff with Hilton Orlando on different citywide stuff. I didn't work there specifically, but we partnered with some different things there on different owner conferences and things like that. So it was kind of a stepping stone for people who were trying to grow their career within Hilton without having to move. So it was kind of a unique spot. Learned a lot about the entire business. When you're in a big box, it's so different because every department has so many people.
Yeah.
Housekeeping is housekeeping, engineering is engineering. People work together, but it's like if something goes wrong in the meeting space, you call banquets, and then banquets takes care of it. If something goes wrong in the lobby, you call housekeeping, and like everyone just kind of knew like who to call for certain stuff. In the mid-size hotels, and especially in the select service hotels, it's everybody's job to do everything. And I think that was really important for me to kind of understand, especially going back into the big boxes later in sales, because there is this kind of, I don't want to call it a divide, but just misunderstanding on how important the salespeople's role is in the overall operation. If the sales team doesn't do their job, people don't get their hours. And most people, not all, but most of the sales managers that I've worked with in the industry, it means a lot for them to know that when they do a good job, all of their colleagues are getting hours, sometimes overtime. And so they take a lot of pride in that. And the biggest misconception is that all of the operation team just thinks we sit behind and like stare at a computer and listen to music all day and don't do anything.
Right.
And it really couldn't be further from the truth. It's just a different thing that we have to do so that we can make sure that you're busy. And when the ops teams do a great job being busy and take care of our customers when they're in house, it becomes that much more easier in the sales process to keep them coming back. So it's so intertwined. And I think that we as an industry have done a really kind of poor job with the silos that have existed within departments. And I'm sure you've seen that on the ops side, like, hey, housekeeping, you got to come clean up the lobby. Like somebody like had an accident, when by the time they come out and do it, if you had enough coverage at the front desk, you probably could have cleaned it up yourself.
These silos without a doubt exist. I mean, I think union labor exasperates it, obviously, especially when you're at these big box hotels. But I think another thing too, specifically within the ops and sales pillars, I've actually witnessed a level of resentment from ops towards sales, which is damaging that we haven't addressed it yet. There's a certain element of like, well, if somebody calls off in the front office or in housekeeping, somebody has to go in. The hotel's open 24/7. Sales has cushy hours, and they get to kick back and hang out and whatever. But as we've seen with coronavirus, the guests will stop coming. And I think we didn't understand that before. We just thought the guests are going to show up. And as we're seeing record occupancy, record rates leading up to coronavirus. But now one thing that we all have to be aware of is that the guests will stop. And I think this is the first time that we've really seen it. Like literally the hotel will be 1% occupancy. And we've seen that. So why don't you break it down for us? Like, if I'm a night auditor and I never see sales and I have no idea, but I'm just, sales just has it so easy. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like working in sales and how it works so we can understand that.
Sure. So the one thing that I always tried to share with new team members that had transitioned from ops into our sales department, who kind of had that thought process that you guys got a cushy job and all this different stuff. The easiest way for me to explain it was If a night auditor makes a mistake, it affects one potential guest. Now, if that guest goes online and leaves a bad review, it's out there and, it can have a little bit of a snowball effect, nothing terrible. If a salesperson makes a mistake on a contract, or a coordinator makes a mistake when they're helping a salesperson with the contract, that affects the entire hotel's bottom line. So the level of due diligence we have to pay on every day, I mean, there's certain things that, and it played out really interesting in COVID, just in how people wrote contracts and their cancellation policies. I've talked with several different owners that, like, our salespeople were just so loose with their contracts, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no. You gave them goals that they had to hit. And the only way for them to hit goals was to write certain clauses that allowed more flexibility for a certain type of group that gave you more exposure to risk in adverse scenarios. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is we have to mitigate the risk for the hotel and for everyone's hours. I mean, one of my favorite things that I did whenever I had big site visits that I felt differentiated me from a lot of my colleagues was, we could have a driver pick somebody up from the airport and take them back to the airport and do all this different stuff. And the hotel had, a nice Cadillac Escalade. I always went to the airport and picked up my customer, and I always took them back to the airport, because the one thing that a customer will do whenever you're talking to them in that environment is they're just way more open. You're not selling the hotel. You're not selling anything like that. You're just having a conversation, human to human. And one of my favorite customers, she asked me when we were going back to the airport, she's like, so what's your least favorite thing about your job? And I said, contracts. She's like, what's the most important thing of your job? I said, contracts. I said, because if I make a mistake and I do something wrong in the negotiation process, we could go from a projected 90% occupancy, and then the group can cancel because I made a mistake. And now we go down to 20% occupancy and nobody works for a week. So the level of responsibility that I have to kind of make sure that these people can put food on their table is immense. And I take a lot of pride in that. And that's the one thing that people, if a front desk agent makes a mistake, it might cost the hotel $500 in comp room nights. And the other thing that a lot of times happens when groups are in-house, a front office manager, director of front office will reach out to sales and say, hey, we have this guest, blah, blah, blah. This is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think? And as a salesperson, we have a different viewpoint on it, because I can say, okay, well, this piece of business is worth $800,000 to my hotel. This guest that's having an issue, comping them 2 room nights is insulting, since they're spending $800,000 with our hotel. Let me handle it. And it's not from a position. And so I think where a lot of the silos and the misconceptions happen is, if the sales team doesn't do a good enough job on a day-to-day basis, integrating themselves within the culture and the heartbeat of the hotel, when situations like that happen and a salesperson comes over the top of a director of front office who technically may have a higher title and sit on the EC committee, but at the end of the day, it's the salesperson's customer and they have to make the call. That's where some of the friction happens. And so if you build up a good enough trust with your team, because you go in and check on them on a day-to-day basis, how's your day going? How are the checkouts today? Like, just having normal conversations with them. Then when a situation arises that you kind of have to step in and play a trump card and say, this is how we're going to handle this, because if we do this wrong, like, not only do we affect this large piece of business, but within the ecosystem of where this company lives, they have $90 million worth of business that goes to hotels every year. Now we don't get a piece of that pie. So that's kind of the level of responsibility that we have on our plate. And so our main focus is always trying to mitigate risk. We're kind of like attorneys, but also have to be able to have a conversation and sell, because if we don't, then, we're not bringing business in. And there are some salespeople who are really good at contracts, but they don't understand the ebbs and flows of a negotiation. And so they'll lose a piece of business because they get stuck in the muds over something that doesn't really put a whole lot of risk on the hotel. There's other sales managers who have no idea what's going on, and they'll give a customer all kinds of stuff. And now they've exposed the hotel to just an immense amount of risk, that if things go sideways, it's hard to recover. And when I say it's hard to recover, it means, now people are forced PTO or no hours, just all kinds of different little things that can happen. And so there's a level of importance from a group and even a transient perspective. So like on the OTAs and different things like that, the way that the contracts are negotiated, they own all of the customers' information, right? Like the front office finds out like Kipsu, for example, can't use Kipsu on a lot of Expedia stuff because you don't have their cell phone.
Sure, right. It doesn't come through with any of their contact or reg info, right?
Right. And so if I'm managing the Expedia account and there's some issues that are happening, I have to understand, okay, this is a one-off. Things happen. I pick up the phone, I call my Expedia rep and I'm like, listen, the hotel made a mistake. They get it. But if it's a recurring thing and it's like, okay, every time this certain person is at the front desk with a certain type of account, we always have issues. And so then it becomes a coachable opportunity to say, hey, there's a reason why this guest profile is important. Like we need to make sure that like these guests are well taken care of. And this is why, because at the end of the day, this account produces 8% of our revenue for the year. So if we make a mistake and mess up this account through Expedia or Virgin Atlantic or any of the big travel companies, now we have to go out and find how do we fill up 8% of our hotel because we pissed off this one customer.
Sure. And I think that's a huge opportunity because what you find is a lot of times in front office or ops, you get the sales just isn't communicating, or the gravity of like individual guests is lost on the people who are going to be interacting with them the most. And especially when you add 1,800 rooms into the mix and that much volume of traffic, there has to be a better way. And I think that's where a lot of the gripes come from is, sometimes, and people have egos, right? Especially when you're a director of front office or whatever. And if you screw something up, you make a mistake with the group and then everybody's looking at you, but then you can throw back and say, well, sales didn't communicate this, or that wasn't on the resume or whatever. Like there's so much roundabout blaming, finger pointing, et cetera, that can take place. But it's
I'm gonna stop you right there because you hit something that's super important. Finger pointing. I've worked in hotels where it was rampant, and in the last two hotels that I worked in, our general manager was no nonsense. You always knew where you stood with them. And we had such a winning culture because when things went sideways, it's this department's fault or that department's fault. It's how do we fix it? How do we make it right? Like we're all in this together. Like, and so a lot of that had to do with, he had a really good continuity in his staff. And so like the director of front office had been there for 20 years. The director of housekeeping had been there for 15 years. There have been people who had been there, and then he also brought in young talent to help groom and grow. And so there was this great balance of, constantly getting better with innovation and different stuff, whilst also not saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Sure. And so I think a lot of times if the culture within a hotel is bad, it's because the leadership manages from a level of whose fault is it, not how do we fix it. And at the end of the day, like the thing that makes hotels amazing are the humans inside of them. But the things that make hotels interesting are the humans inside of them, because we always screw stuff up. Like there's no way that anybody is perfect. And I mean, this is a perfect example. So I have a customer who's become a really close friend. He was at the hotel for 15 years prior to me getting there and taking over the account. So my first year in the hotel whenever he was back for his thing, and we had a contract out for 2 more years of his piece of business. My director of sales is like, listen, he's like, this guy's been so loyal. Don't screw this up, blah, blah, blah. So I put in the work, developed a great relationship, and kind of figured out what made him tick. And his wife and his son always came down for the event that he hosted. It was in a slow week every other year in November. That was just a tough week to fill as far as like the demand and compression within the city. So it's like, it was a huge piece of business for the hotel. And in 2019, he came in and he always got the presidential suite. Like, it was in his contract. Well, in 2019, we had a situation where it was in his contract. It was put in the resume differently by our reservations department. And so when the front office had the person in the presidential suite call down and say, called the overnight person. So somebody who doesn't have to deal with a lot of group resumes on a regular basis, called the overnight person, gets a call from the presidential suite and says, hey, I'd love to extend my stay for a day. Can I do that? Sure. Since it wasn't coded property under the right SRP, he saw as, okay, this person just needs to be in a certain type of suite. I'm going to move them to a similar type of suite. Well, the hotel only had 2 presidential suites, and the one presidential suite was out for renovations on the shower to make it ADA compatible. And so when my guest arrived, I met him in the lobby. We had gotten him tickets to go to Disney. I was driving him and his wife and his kid over to Disney in the afternoon, and said hello, did our thing. He goes up to his room. I didn't hand deliver his amenity to his room. I trusted that everything was good to go. And turns out all of that had happened and I didn't even know. And so we're driving to a Disney park, and I was like, how's everything going? He's like, good. He goes, it's weird though, because normally we have a suite that has just that killer bathtub in it. My wife loves to sit and just soak in the bath, blah, 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 throughout the week while I'm working. And he's like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to complain. He's like, the suite that we're in, it's great. He's like, it's just not the same as what we're used to. And I thought that that's what we had contracted. And it was what they had contracted. And technically now we were in breach of contract because of this one mistake. So this is a $500,000 piece of business that we are in breach of contract. If this guy wants to make a stink about it, he can.
During a meeting period as well, nonetheless.
And he had a contract out for 2021 and 2023 that were going to get signed before the end of 2019. So I drop him off at Epcot. I said, listen, give me an hour. I'll figure it out. I said, I'll text you whenever I have a solution. I said, we'll make this right. He's like, I know you will. He's like, I don't want to be a pain in the butt. He's like, it's just something that my wife always enjoys. And so if it's available, that's what I prefer. I was like, absolutely. So I get back to the hotel, do some digging. It literally took 30 minutes to figure out what happened and where the gap in communication was. And it was just literally one SRP. So the presidential fit underneath this SRP, but it had a separate letter in it that wasn't put in it. And so that started a domino effect. Mm-hmm. Well, so the person that extended, they had ended up extending another night because once they moved his room, they called and wanted to extend more, blah. So we were able to get him into the presidential suite on the following day. And I called him. I said, listen, we made a mistake. You were supposed to be there. It is contracted. I said, how about I get you some extra Disney tickets for later on the week because you guys are staying after your event's over and you can go back and enjoy the parks again. I was like, you had talked about buying some. He's like, you don't have to do that. I was like, well, I said, we made a mistake. You're going to be we're going to have to move your rooms tomorrow. He's like, Justin, I don't care. He's like, it's not a big deal. I just appreciate you helping me get figured out. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, we're going to do this because we care about you and we value your business. And so the next day, whenever they got into their presidential suite, I came in on a Saturday. I went over to Disney Springs. There was a bath store that sold bath bombs. And I bought this crazy nice thing for his wife with a handwritten note with the Disney tickets, just thanking him for being understanding because it was our fault. We made a mistake and we fixed it. But had we not, if this was just a customer that we didn't have a relationship with, they could have made a big stink and we were in. And so those are the situations where if you don't know your ops team and you don't have a good relationship with your ops team, things go sideways really quick. Because I could have went in finger pointing and said, listen, I sent this through in the resume. I sent this through correctly. I filled out all the right forms. You made this mistake. You did this wrong. You did this wrong. And it doesn't solve the problem.
Right, right.
I went in and said, hey, this is the situation. Let's try and figure out a way to fix it. And within 30 minutes, we had a solution. I called him. He was happy. He signed the contract for the next 2 years before he left, and all was good. But that's the importance of not having those silos that we talked about earlier.
There's a couple things about that I think are significant. Number one is that, and I think that is atypical. Number one, like you mentioned, you're driving, you're going and you're picking them up, you're driving them, you're taking them here, you're facilitating that relationship in a vulnerable setting that I think obviously enhances the connection that you have with your clients. Number two, you're going to a store, picking something up, coming in on a Saturday. This is unheard of for a lot of sales managers and people in the sales realm. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've received on Saturday afternoon when, you know, that light bulb moment pops into that sales manager's head and they think, oh my God, did this fall through the cracks? Whatever happened? And you have somebody spewing anxiety onto you without actually offering any solutions and just saying, ops, just take care of it. And that's when you hang up the phone and you think to yourself, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. And that's when you get pissed off. But I have to say, I think a lot of the ops people listening and even the sales, I hope that anybody from sales who's listening will take a page out of your book and understand that there's a way to do this intimately that can positively impact the rest of the hotel. Now, your philosophy on being a hospitable sales manager, being actively involved, I mean, that led you to some seriously impressive heights in terms of your production. So tell me about the apex of your sales career before COVID hit. What was your production like? What was your life looking like at the time? Like, just tell me about that.
Sure. So once you get to the quote unquote big box level, you're kind of in the top 1% of the people within the hotel world. And then once you're in that realm, it is cutthroat. And so everyone's going after everyone's business. Everyone's constantly trying to, I mean, the level of kind of cattiness that goes on even within the Hilton organization, because everyone has individual goals. I tried to take an approach that was more, if I do my job right, the tide rises for everybody. Mm-hmm. So if I build a good relationship with a customer and they have a great experience, they're going to go to Baltimore next year. I can call my friend in Baltimore, Harbor, whatever the name of that Hilton is, and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. Be on the lookout for the RFP. And then you kind of help the whole sales process go along. So prior to COVID happening, now it takes a little bit longer to kind of build up a pipeline to do it this way. And we live in an environment where something that a lot of the ops team doesn't realize is that we're on a 6-month, notification. If you don't hit your goal for 6 months, you're fired. That's it. No questions asked. Like, here's
so
the
talk
black
about
and
that
white.
Cushy job, right? Talk about that cushy job where you're kicking back, chilling 9 to 5, no stress, living on top of the world, whining and dining. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure there were nights where you lost sleep over your goals and had these bouts of anxiety and self-doubt. And that leads to that kind of cutthroat atmosphere, like you mentioned.
Well, and so I think a lot of it goes to each individual. And I saw some of my really close friends and colleagues where that stress just ate them alive. I mean, they have a couple deals that fall apart and now they go from being in a good position to make a nice bonus to crap, I might lose my job. And that stress is real. And until you are 3 months into not hitting your goal and you feel like you got 3 months left of a job that you like and really enjoy and think you're good at, you don't know what it's like. And so that was something I always tried to share with my new team is like, listen, like it's not impossible. It's a lot of people are going to have a lot of success doing this. But you have to figure out how to manage that stress, because if all you think about is your goal, your customer feels it.
There's a level of empathy that can be applied here, because ops people always say, and I'll make a general statement about it because I come from ops, that the sales team doesn't understand the stress we go through when a guest is yelling at you and you're on your ivory tower somewhere in your C-suite, avoiding the situation. And we have this huge line, all these requirements we have to meet, over promising, under delivered. Do you know how much stress that is? And I will not minimize that stress, because that stress is insane and it causes you to work 16 hours a day to try and keep up with it. And it's a lot. But that's also a short-term stress that once that day is over,
it's gone.
Once the line goes down, you can take a sigh of relief. Now, ops empathizing with sales, okay, you guys are dealing with the weight of the literal world in terms of you have 1,800 rooms counting on you, and you probably have 1,200 employees. I mean, total in the complex. I mean, you have people's lives in the balance.
Auto shutdown initiated.
Financial prosperity. You think about their children. You think about my family. How's my kids going to do this? All this stuff. I think we need to empathize a little bit. And I appreciate you highlighting this, because most people just simply do not understand.
Yeah. Well, and so on that note, the one thing that when you talk about the stressors, everyone gets called a liar or whatever at some point in their career at the front desk, right? Like, you lied. You said I was going to get my room by 4:00. It's 4:10. Like, what's going on?
Right.
Like, just something little. So a situation that I had happen, and like, I try and pride myself in my reputation, because I genuinely feel like your reputation is your currency. And so, like, as long as you do what's right, things are going to continue to kind of fall in place. So in October of 19, I came into a situation where there was a company that was kind of going sideways. They were
Mic off.
This group, the value of their contract was just under 400,000, and so their, kind of minimum that they had to pick up to fulfill their contractual obligation was like 320.
And just to provide context, in that environment, is a $400,000 piece of business, would you say that's small, medium, large?
Medium.
Okay.
Medium, and it was a good piece of business, because when there's that kind of compression in the city, it allowed us to have food and beverage for our banquets team to work that week. And they didn't need a whole lot of sleeping rooms. It was mostly meeting space and food and beverage and stuff like that. So again, it was one of those situations, whenever we signed a contract for it, it's like, we know we're going to sell out the hotel. The rate that I'm getting on this contract is not what I'm going to get from a transient guest because of the compression in the marketplace. However, I can fill up my meeting space and do $200,000 in food and beverage, and now my banquets team works this week. So it's a win, right? Like, my staff gets to work. That's a huge benefit. So we took the business.
I got chills, by the way, because that's the context that we need to start thinking about. So
And so in August, I reached out to him and said, hey, listen, like, your pickup's really, really, really bad. Like, is this typical? Oh yeah, we always pick up 6 weeks out. Got it. So you're not worried. You don't want to give us rooms back. Nope. Okay. Got it. 6 weeks out. Pickup's still terrible. I mean, they're looking down the barrel at $250,000 in damages.
Ouch.
And like, hey, how can we help? And so they're like, well, what if we give you rooms back? We know there's some compression. And I said, you can give us rooms back. And I said, but the way that everything's laid out in the contract, you're still responsible for this amount of performance. I said, our goal is to have a long-term customer. I was like, so after the event passes, we'll try and figure out a situation to where it's a win-win for both of us. They took that to mean, okay, we're going to give the rooms back. The hotel's going to sell them. We're off the hook. That's not what I said. And so they give the rooms back. We sell them.
At a higher rate, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. They get an invoice for their attrition damages that contractually are due 30 days in advance. So it's October 1. This event's supposed to happen in November. They owe us, $240,000, or they're in breach of contract.
Can you real quick define attrition damages for our audience who may not be aware of what that is?
Sure. So attrition damages, it's basically the hotel negotiates a certain amount depending on the size of a group. Typically, if it's a small group, the group has to perform at 90%. So for ease of numbers, if they have a $10,000 contract, they have to have $9,000 worth of revenue, or they have potential attrition damages. Once you get over $100,000 for the piece of business, it can be negotiated down to 20%. Just because when there's that many people involved, things happen. And at the end of the day, the attrition is not like, customers think that the hotels like attrition because it's just free money. But if you have $100,000 in food and beverage attrition, it goes to the bottom line. And now my team members still don't work for that week because there was no food and beverage. The owners are okay with it.
Sure.
I'm not okay with it. My friend Jose doesn't get to work. My friend Jill doesn't get to work this week because you didn't perform. So there's damages. So we don't like them either because it means that like our people are hurt. So they were trying to say that like I lied to them. I got attorneys called. I had to go through depositions. So like they like the stress that the sales team can go through. It's not just having to hit numbers. It's people literally going after you whenever they don't perform. Like they were in the wrong. They knew they were in the wrong. There was never anything in writing saying that if they gave us rooms back, we were going to honor. I said, our goal is to maintain a great partnership with you. You guys do a lot of business. If everything else performs right, and we know, okay, we were still able to sell out the hotel. I said, because at the end of the day, like we're sold out now. I was like, but we could have 100 guests not show up for those rooms. And now we're sitting at 90%. So had you performed, we wouldn't have ever had to worry about that. So that's the other thing that they're like, well, I can't book a room. You're full. And it's like, well, we're full. We're not going to oversell the hotel when there's this kind of compression because there's nowhere to walk them. And it's just too much risk. So
risky.
There's lots of different things that you have to balance in the whole process of a group. And at the end of the day, like those are the kind of decisions that we have to mull through and mull over. And we don't take them lightly because they affect everybody within the hotel. And so while my name was getting dragged through the mud, ops was just going around doing their business. And the group, I mean, technically we could have canceled the group, took them to court. We would have won in court, no issue. The ownership would have made a lot of money and no harm, no foul. That didn't make sense for the hotel because it's still, I mean, like we get money, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's a hospitality business. Like we want to,
right.
have a good reputation.
Optics component as well that you obviously have to be aware of. And I do want to talk again, about these very similar things that we don't think about. So for the front desk, for the front office supervisor, let's say, who is trying to authorize somebody's card for a $250 smoking fee. And they're like, this is really, this sucks. Well, there's also the senior regional sales manager who's in litigations with a group who owes $250,000. So there's and I think the important lesson here is let's not take away anything from each party because there's obviously just pros and cons to each. There's a reason why salespeople are a certain way, and there's a reason why I'll ride or die by ops. You know what I mean? Like there's just people have their preferences. So I think it's important, like I said, to highlight those similarities. So when you reach this top 1%, what doors start to open for you? What does that look like when you're selling $1 million+ contracts and programs. How does that look in application? What can you do? Tell me about that part of it, maybe the more glamorous side of it, if you will.
Sure. So the side that everyone sees of sales is the glamorous side, right? They see us, getting to do different fun stuff. And it is fun. And I've been blessed to do some really, really awesome stuff. I got to take clients on multiple occasions to Fenway and take batting practice, one time off of the knuckleball thrower. I can't think of his name. Tim Wakefield. And then the following year, he was supposed to pitch to us again, and he had something come up with a schedule. So we just took BP at Fenway off of a machine. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for all of those customers, and like to get to walk out onto Fenway Field that's been around forever. Like I literally have a video and I sent it to my mom and I said, hey, can you send this to the baseball coach that cut me in high school and say, look at where Justin's at. He's taking BP at Fenway.
That's funny.
So there was a level of pettiness that kind of went into it, but it was, something that like, when you talk about opportunities that we get to do, there's certain things that we get to do because of the value of these customers. They're used to a certain type of entertainment and appreciation. And it's more of an appreciation thing. It's like, listen, we appreciate you as a customer. We want to go have fun with you. Like, so if I'm at a trade show in Vegas, I always kind of tried to operate differently in everything I did. So whereas most of my colleagues, the trade shows that we would go to as an industry, it's anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to sit in a booth and talk to people on appointments.
Sure.
It's a lot of money. The hotel's budget for it. But I always felt there was a better way. So the last year, the biggest industry event's called IMEX. It's in Vegas every year. And then they do it in the summertime in Frankfurt, Germany. I said, I'm not paying to be on the floor. And some of my colleagues are like, what do you mean? You're not going to have appointments? I was like, all of my customers are going to be there. I already have relationships with them. Why am I going to waste 15 minutes of their time on the floor when I can text them and go have coffee because they want to get away from the floor? Or I can take them out to lunch because there's no food provided on the show floor and we can sit and have a great conversation. Or I can take them to see Bruno Mars. And so like literally I spent probably $12,000 less and had a more impactful kind of experiences with my customers just by trying to think a little bit outside the box. And so the main reason I was able to do all of this is because my boss, I hate calling him my boss because he's just such a good, like, I think there's a negative connotation that goes to boss. My leader is by far the most brilliant guy I've ever got to work with. He's allowed me to kind of flourish in my personality and how I sell. And there's certain things that I've gained over the last 4 years working for him that, it's invaluable. And so there's different things that like, the hospitality industry is beautiful because it's going to present different opportunities to you throughout your life that are once in a lifetime opportunities. Can't do them anywhere else. Like I can sell almost anything. I read, I train, I do all kinds of different stuff to make sure that I understand how the sales processes are evolving with technology, what customers are saying. I take pride in like what I do. So I could sell anything. The reason that I love the hospitality space is because the impact that I have on being successful, I get to see in people having, like at the Christmas party in 2019, when a banquet server came up to the sales table and was like, thank you so much. This was the best year of my career. We had such a successful year. Thanks for all your hard work. They get it. They know that we're constantly like doing our, damnedest to make sure that they're putting food on their table. That is more exciting to me than freaking going to Bruno Mars. That's real. Part of the job. That's part of the job. And it's important that I, put in that work. But having somebody understand that like we are trying to do everything we can to help them have a successful life for themselves, that's what the rewarding part is. And that's the part that I think a lot of people get lost in the minutia of RFPs, requests for proposals, the minutiae of the contracts. And the one thing that my leader has just constantly pounded in our heads, and unfortunately half of my department still doesn't do it, is he's like, be on the floor. When you have customers in house, he's like, there's nothing more important than having FaceTime with them and seeing them interact with the banquets team, seeing them interact with the front desk. Because then if something happens, like you saw it, like they're gonna tell you in person, like, hey, we had like 10 people, their rooms were dirty when they got there. What's going on? Oh, okay, let me check into it. Then I go to the front office and I figure it out. And then it's their first day. We resolve the issue before it's a problem, and it's no big deal. If I don't spend that time being out there, then after they leave, they're like, hey, by the way, your rooms were filthy. Like, what's wrong? And so the reason I continually call him a great leader is because for the past 3 years, our hotels have been in the top 5 Hilton hotels in North America for meeting planner satisfaction. And the reason is because we're all pulling in the same direction.
Well, and so you always see it. You always see the meeting planners, at least in my experience. I'll see them in the lobby, but you never see the sales manager. You see the meeting plan. Where's the? It honestly makes no sense. So when you say it, it's like this is some revolutionary thing, which it technically kind of is, but it's also common sense and should be commonplace in this industry. And it's unfortunate that it's not. And maybe in a post-COVID world, where we realize that, like I said earlier, the guests will not show up. We know this to be true, and they will not show up. Maybe it'll be valued on a higher scale. I
hope so. The one kind of worry that I have in a post-COVID world is the loss of just amazing talent, from front office to events teams to sales teams. There have been so many of let's face it, the people who are the best in the hotel industry, when they got laid off, they were able to find other stuff because they're great people. They're going to figure out a way to win. The people who come back are the ones that are just kind of sitting around saying, it's going to come back. I'll figure it out. And so
there's and I think nothing wrong, right? So let's just I want to kind of address that. If you're not doing anything right now, we're in a global pandemic. The world is in shambles, essentially. Take that time. It's okay. But I think while simultaneously, practically and realistically know that not everybody's sitting around. There are people who are taking steps as we speak, which are naturally getting ahead. So I just want to say that and go ahead and continue.
Well, and I mean, if somebody's listening to this podcast and they just heard you say that, they're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're actively trying to understand different things. And so that's enough. Like that person is going to be okay. And they're going to add value to the hotel when they come back. It's the people who aren't doing anything. They're just sitting at home feeling sorry for themselves, saying this whole situation is everyone's fault. This situation is no one's fault. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. The only thing you can do is, make the best out of whatever cards you've been dealt and figure out a way to make your own personal situation better. If you have the ability to make others' situation better too while you're doing it, that's awesome. But if you just figure out a way to help take care of yourself, that's so important right now, and there's nothing wrong with, working for Amazon, delivering packages until your job comes back. It's admirable. Like, you're doing something. You're putting food on your table. You're not just sitting back and feeling sorry for yourself. If you're reading books, there's so many things that you can be doing right now. There's so many people who are sharing. The access that I've had to people since I've been on furlough is insane. I've talked to CEOs. I've talked to CFOs. I've had access to some of the most amazing talent in our country and world. And they have been nothing but genuinely curious and helpful on how they can help myself, how they can help our industry. Everyone understands that our industry has been impacted. They all get it. They all want to help. But if we don't help them help us by like communicating, hey, this is where I'm hurting, like I don't have any food to feed my family. If you're not telling anyone that, then how do they know to help you? Like, so we've spent our whole lives in the hospitality industry serving others that it's super hard to like take the time to serve ourselves right now. And that's what makes me kind of not worried, but just concerned about how it all unfolds, because we've always given so much to others, and it's in our DNA to serve others. Like, we don't make the most money in the world. We don't have like the best hours, but we have the best damn stories because we get to help other people have a good time in their life. And we get to have fun with our colleagues doing the same thing. So that's the kind of stuff that is so important that we remember that. But right now you got to help yourself so we can get back there. And sometimes just telling your story, hey, I'm struggling, I'm having a bad day. Tell somebody. People want to listen. People want to help.
And in turn, we can still have a servant's heart even while helping ourselves. With Hospitality MD, for example, I would say that by going all in on this, it is helping me. But I also lead with the North Star that everything that we do is for others. And you can do both. And there is a way to do both, but this conversation with you, I would hope that it would be bringing you some value, but you also know that everything that we unpacked is going to provide little nuggets of value to people all over the world who are listening to this podcast right now.
Absolutely. And it does. I mean, just getting to talk about the joy that my career has brought me, it's nice. It's therapeutic.
Right.
It is. I mean, because like at the end of the day, like, gosh, I've got to do some just wildly awesome stuff. And I've got to do it with customers who have become friends. And I've got to do it with colleagues who have become friends. And so like that in and of itself is a blessing. And I have to be grateful for all that. Something I did in July, a big thing with Hilton, Conrad Hilton said, our job is to spread the light and warmth of hospitality throughout the world. And so in July, I decided that I was going to handwrite notes to anybody who was willing to participate. And I had over 40 Hilton team members from all across the United States reach out and say, I'm in, let's do this. And the only objective was, all they had to do was write a handwritten note to somebody who was important to them. So I sent them a package with 5 note cards, 5 stamps, 5 envelopes, and a handwritten note about how grateful I was that they were going to have some fun with me in doing this. The amount of text messages I got back from the people who participated with me, it was amazing. I mean,
it's beautiful.
It cost a little bit of money. I'm very blessed that my wife hasn't had any interruption to her work. So we've been able to, not have to worry about certain things. So I wanted to make sure that I could kind of pay it forward. And something that I always did with my customers was handwritten notes. And they always said how much it meant to them. And I was like, we got to love on each other right now. Like, we have to remind each other that we are all in this together, and everyone's situation is different, right? Like, even though we're all on the same team, like somebody might have a car they're past due on their payment because they can't afford it right now.
Right.
Like, I don't know what that stress is. That's different for them. And so right now it's important for us to love on each other and spread that light and warmth of hospitality to each other. That was something I did in July, and it was great because I ended up getting to have a nice conversation with Hilton CEO Chris Nassetta. Talked about that and some other things about where he's at as a human, because I can't imagine the kind of stress that he's had to deal with in the last 8 months, 10 months, however long it's been, because the guy bleeds hospitality. Like, it's his heart. And to make decisions that he's had to make to essentially save our company, they're not easy. And I think we know that he feels that. Oh yeah. I genuinely agree with you on that. But my goal was I just want to make sure that he knew that there are many people who are out there struggling that appreciate all the stuff that he's doing, even though it's hard, because we know that he still has our best interests at heart. And so that's the thing that's been kind of the benefit of this. I've got to meet you.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Like,
man.
You've added so much value to my day-to-day just thought process just since I've got to meet you. just by the content you're sharing and then the several conversations we've had. So that's the thing where I think that we have to all kind of rally together as we keep fighting back to get to the levels we were at. Is we got to look out for each other.
Without a doubt. Now, I know we're kind of running out of time with this episode, but I want to talk a little bit, give some context for what you're doing now. So with the 1,800 room, incalculable amount of meeting space complex that you were working at, we know that those are that you know, without dwelling on the specifics, we know that you were hit. That opportunity is no more at this moment. But you are one of the people who is self-advocating at the moment and taking on some new challenges. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So something that I always kind of felt was a gap from sales and ops is how we maximized our exposure to the online world via social media, via TripAdvisor, via any kind of like anybody who's talking about us. We've done an amazing job of curating a memorable guest experience within the walls of our hotel. We've done a very average to below average job of making sure that that customer, when they leave, knows how much we appreciated them being within our four walls. So I found a company in July. It was a week before I had a conversation with Chris, and I reached out to their CEO, and they're kind of filling this kind of online reputation management stuff. And I said, listen, our industry needs your help. I'm happy to share any insights I can to help you help our industry. I feel I have a fiduciary responsibility to my teammates to help bring them back to work. And I know that the groups aren't going to come back before transient. So this is something that can kind of fill the void. So we had a great conversation. He shared with me that he had actually reached out to Marriott in 2018 with a white paper of how he could help the hotel business with online reputation management and how it kind of sputtered along. So we kind of developed a plan of attack and where we would go. The next week when I talked to Chris, he's like, the one thing Hilton has to do to win long-term is we have to understand and win the digital space. He's like, I don't know how that is. I don't know what we do. He's like, but that's my focus on where we're deploying some of our intellectual bandwidth and just what little money we have left. It's going to be going to understand how we can win long-term by owning the digital space. And so that kind of gave me the, like, all right, there's something to this. So I've gone back and forth with the CEO for a while. We did a round of calls in September with different ownership groups, regional VPs, directors of sales and marketing, and a couple GMs, and just listened to them and shared with what the software could help do. And there was a resounding, yes, we need your help. There was a consistent, I don't know if we can, afford the pennies that it would cost to do this right now. Long story short, I was fortunate enough to get a job offer from this company, and I'm going to help them build out their hospitality and hotel vertical to help hotels better manage their online reputation so that gap between when the guest comes to visit us, we're still there paying attention to them and showing them that we care.
Right. And at a time when it's more significant than ever, because each and every room night counts. Each and every guest, each and every family who, maybe before we've again taken for granted that, that family who saved up their money to stay at the hotel and wanted a great experience because there was a $200,000 group that was staying and they were the star of the show, and that guest left and were forgotten about before they even walked out the door. I think there's a need for what this startup is offering. And I think to your point that by prioritizing hospitality after the guest experience and elongating that hospitality, it will bring people back to work. It will increase rates. It will increase occupancy. It will help lead us to a recovery, and it will help some hotels, again, just like the people who are not doing anything right now are putting themselves at an honest disadvantage over those who might be listening to podcasts, reading, actively learning. Hotels that are hiding behind the veil of it's COVID, oh my God, we're helpless. no, it's time to start moving forward. And this is a great opportunity to do so. With that being said, I will say for everybody listening, we will be hosting the CEO of Widewell, which is the startup company, along with Justin, back on next week's episode to talk more about how Widewell plans to lead the recovery of the industry through innovation and through guest services and hospitality. So please look forward for that episode next week and to hear more from Justin and Matt, who is their CEO. With that being said, Justin, before we wrap up today, is there anything else, any final sentiments before we wrap up the episode?
I think it's the one thing that I hope everybody takes away from this is that the hospitality business isn't made up of beautiful resorts. It's made up of people. And you can throw some amazing amenities at anything that you want, add a lazy river, do whatever. It's going to bring some people there, but the thing that brings them back are the people that they interact with them, that they're there. And so I hope that as we come out of this, that we don't lose sight of the fact that people make the experience, not the hotels and not the amenities. It's the people. So that's what I hope people take away from this. It's something that is important to me because the people are what make people want to travel. I could care less what kind of thread count my bed has. But if somebody's nice to me and smiles at me when I walk in the door, it's going to make my day.
Even in an age where people are further apart, I think it's hospitality isn't dead by any means. And I think
it's more important than ever.
Right. And
everyone needs it right now.
When it comes to Widewell, when it comes to HospitalityMD, when it comes to all the innovators right now that are in this space, we're just getting started in terms of the profound hospitality that we can provide as we move forward and recover. So with that,
we're going to pull this back together, aren't we?
We absolutely are, with the people, first and foremost. Yep. With people. Yeah. So Justin, thank you for your contributions to hospitality and for being on the show with us. We looking forward to next week's episode where we get to learn more about how you and Matt plan to help our industry recover.
Can't wait. Look forward to it. Appreciate all your help, Kyle.
Awesome. Hey guys, thanks for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, put on the bell notifications if you haven't already. Hope you learned something about sales. Please be sure to tune in next week to find more about Justin and his new adventure. We'll see you then.